morning. It is 8:02. You're watching the T. A beautiful morning we're having here in Vancouver. Thanks so much for joining us. An unexpected adventure for some BC Ferries passengers last night trying to get from Duke Point to Tsawwassen. They were stuck on board the Coastal Renaissance for hours after a mechanical failure. Our Greg Harper is following this story for us this morning. And Greg, after all that, they ended up where they started.
That's right. Good morning, Mary. It's going to be a long day. It was a long night for many BC Ferries customers. Behind me here right now at the Tsawwassen Ferry Terminal, that is the Coastal Renaissance, the same vessel that had an issue last night. We understand an electrical issue. They obviously were able to fix it quickly, but the actions last night didn't happen so fast. So I've spoken to a couple of passengers that were on board the sailing last night, and they say it was roughly 5 to 6 minutes into the sailing that left Duke Point at roughly 8:15 when 3 horns sounded. The engine came to a halt, the anchor was released, and the boat or the ship just sat there for roughly 4 hours before being towed back to Duke Point by 3 tugboats. Now, I spoke to Gloria, who arrived here this morning. She is one of 6, she says, that actually spent the night at the terminal. She says the staff at BC Ferries were great. They were offered coffee, hot chocolate, tea, and sandwiches as well. Her plan today, to get some sleep.
The boat all of a sudden stopped. The captain came on and said they've got engine trouble. Then then he came on a little while later. They kept notifying us whatever any problems were, and he said the breaker was fused, and they were having the engineers work on it. And then basically, you know, they kept updating us. Then the tugs came, and by the time we actually got back into Nanaimo, it was 2 o'clock in the morning.
Coastal Renaissance experienced a mechanical failure due to an electrical issue shortly after departing Sunday evening, and it had to anchor off of Jack Point around 8:30 p.m. Sunday night. The vessel was brought back to Duke Point via tug, and the tug arrived on scene around 10:30. We did have passengers on board, and while they were on board and as we were bringing them back to Duke Point, we provided them with complimentary food and beverages. There was a sailing cancellation out of Tsawwassen last night, too. The Coastal Renaissance would have done a round trip, so the 10:45 sailing departing Tsawwassen was canceled, and customers at Tsawwassen who planned to travel through Duke Point, they were given the option to travel through Swartz Bay instead.
And that is the Coastal Renaissance that's about to leave here from Tsawwassen back to Nanaimo. It arrived here at around 7:35 from Duke Point. The issue has been fixed. Gloria was a foot passenger, but many others like Aaron, who I spoke to on the phone, he's still waiting to leave Duke Point. He said he got about an hour's sleep in his vehicle, and unlike Gloria, he says he feels that communication could have been better from BC Ferries to its customers. He feels that more could have been done. Mary?
Just hearing that one passenger speak just makes me tired after hearing what she went through, but it's always a risk when you are taking these ferries. Thank you so much, Greg. 8:05 now on Breakfast Television. The Delta Police Board is inviting anyone concerned with the investigation into the wife of the police chief to attend its next meeting. An assault allegation against Lorraine Dubois is being investigated by the Surrey RCMP after an incident earlier this month. She's accused of berating and spraying a woman with a hose who mistakenly walked onto the family's property. Karen Sidhu believes she was mistreated because she is a woman of color. Surrey Mounties were called in after the file was reportedly closed by the Delta Police Department. The Delta Police Board meets at 9:30 a.m. tomorrow. Recent deaths and injuries involving police wellness checks are prompting calls for more funding for preventative measures and crisis services. Ashley Burr has this story.
Dragged, stepped on, sometimes shot dead by police during so-called wellness checks. In the wake of several high-profile incidents in Canada and the U.S., mental health advocates say lack of funding has thrust police into a role they're ill-equipped to deal with.
And for a lot of people who are street involved, who use substances, the police presence in their lives doesn't mean wellness. It actually means disruption and lack of safety.
A campaigner with Vancouver's Pivot Legal Society says police attendance at wellness checks often escalates situations and puts people at risk.
We need to look at our entire system of care in situations where they're in crisis, where things culminate in a situation where there's a concern that they're a harm to themselves or someone else. And then suddenly the only available service is the service that's available 24/7, which is police.
Last week, a video was released showing a Kelowna RCMP officer dragging and stepping on the head of a UBC Okanagan student during a wellness check. Mona Wang is now suing the officer. Earlier this month, a 62-year-old father of 4 was shot and killed in Ontario by Peel police. Ijaz Chaudhry's family says he suffered from schizophrenia and was going through an episode when his daughter called the non-emergency police line. That incident occurred less than a month after Regis Korchinski-Paquette died after falling from her Toronto apartment's balcony while police officers were in her home responding to a possible assault call. Her mother has said she wanted police to take her daughter to a mental health facility. Clinical counselor Dr. Natasha Ghosh says in these kinds of situations, de-escalation should be priority number 1.
Perhaps not being in uniform, right? So kind of humanizing themselves in that experience so that the individual isn't on the defensive right away and wondering what this situation is going to be like.
Ghosh also suggests officers shouldn't be asked to handle these kinds of calls alone.
It would be great to have a mental health professional that was there along with the police officer. So I think there is that issue of safety as well, right? For the person going in to do the wellness check. There is an issue of safety, and we want to make sure everybody feels safe and protected in that situation.
So let's talk to people who have experienced mental health issues and see what would have served you in this moment where you were so scared that maybe you had an object in your hand that looked like a weapon, but really what you were trying to do was protect yourself because you were more scared than you've ever been in your life.
In New Westminster, Ashley Burr, City News.
The next update on the cases of COVID-19 in BC will come down this afternoon. The province reported 10 new cases on Friday, bringing the total to 2,878. 174 people have died. Premier John Horgan says the province has been successful at flattening the curve. It means more restrictions can be eased and we can gradually move into the third phase of reopening. He says the province is able to open more industries, recreation areas, and institutions, but gatherings must remain at 50 people or less. If you live in Vancouver, you now have one more option to cool off this summer. The city says 10 spray parks have reopened, including McLean, Stanley, and Grandview Park. Lifeguards will be back at the beach as of July 13th, and 4 outdoor pools will reopen around the same time. The city of Vancouver has also released updated safety measures, which include closed change rooms and swimmers allowed in time blocks. And today might be a great day to go to one of those spray parks. Hey, Russ?
You got that right, Mary. It's the perfect day to do it. But you know what?